Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on modeling and simulating patient-specific implants. This includes, designing and simulating these implants for activities of daily living. And what do we mean by that? We'll explain. So this webinar is coming from Ozen Engineering. Ozen Engineering has been America's Channel Partner of the Year 3 times in the past. And we do consulting, we sell Ansys, we train engineers on Ansys. And in this webinar, we are going to explore the following topics. Basically, we'll start with the medical implant companies that can now design, analyze, and optimize their implants. Not only for activities of daily living, but also for specific patients, meaning patient-specific data can be used. So this means that each implant can be customized for any person and for any activities of daily living. So in this presentation, we are going to talk about the procedure on how to achieve these developing these medical implants for specific patients as well as for specific activities of daily living. So we'll just jump right into the topic. How do we do this? We do this by coupling musculoskeletal simulation with finite element analysis. So the musculoskeletal simulation, it provides muscular forces, provides joint motion, provides joint reaction forces, and all the inertial information that's needed for finite element analysis. And once you take the input from musculoskeletal simulation and input into finite element analysis, then you get the displacement, stresses, strains, and most importantly, the fatigue life, and answer the questions if the implant is going to fracture or not under certain load conditions. So fatigue life and fracture, those two things, they're kind of, they go hand in hand, and that's really the ultimate goal, to be able to see how long these implants will last in the human body. So the musculoskeletal simulation, as you see here, it's, for example, if we look at the situation here, someone's pushing a bed. There are 3 handle positions. The first handle position is at the bottom, the second one is medium level, and the third one that's at a high level. So if we ask the question, what is the least effort? Which one of these positions requires the least effort? The least effort being the least muscular action. And given all this, what are the loads in the elbows and in the muscles? And how big is the difference? So musculoskeletal models, what you would get out of these simulations is specific, quantitative, not qualitative, but quantitative data. And the answer here is, 0.9 meters is the lowest position. So if you're pushing the bed at 0.9 meter height, then you're doing the most muscular activity. And as time goes by, of course, any one of these heights, they are going to converge because you're basically pushing it away from you. But the most important thing to get from this simulation is that you're getting quantitative data out of these simulations. So, and that's exactly what we need to do this procedure that we are talking about. So the input in a musculoskeletal simulation is, you input the muscles, the bones, the joints, and then you would specify a motion and any other loads on the model. For example, if you're carrying a backpack, a heavy backpack, you would also input that in the musculoskeletal model. The outputs are going to be the muscular forces, and in the joints, the reaction forces. And that's exactly what we need as output, as input to the finite element model. So we are going to get the output from this muscular skeletal model and use them as input to the finite element analysis. So these muscular skeletal models can be used for any type of ergonomics, to address any ergonomics issues, anything from ingress, egress to driver's fatigue. We have written a paper a few years ago addressing driver fatigue. In the lower right-hand corner, actually, we have looked at many different positions, and we have published specific data as to what the position of the driver should be for minimal driver fatigue conditions. So these muscular skeletal models are really good for that, as well as for occupational health. Just like we see on the right-hand side here, if somebody's picking up heavy loads, what are the muscles? Are we overexerting some of the muscles? And in orthopedics, you can actually use muscular skeletal models for looking at orthopedic evaluations, and of course in sports, for biking, for swimming, and for which muscles are being used for different sports activities. And as you see here, when you're biking, you're using most of the leg muscles, but during swimming, you're using not only leg muscles, but also the other muscles in the upper portion of your body. So typical applications for muscular skeletal simulations could be for designing tools, designing equipment, designing furniture, and of course, the topic of today's webinar, orthopedic implants. And you can, using musculoskeletal simulations, you can design to fit different body sizes, to fit different disabilities. And you can plan surgical procedures and rehabilitation procedures as well, rehab programs. You can reduce the cost for prototypes. You can, let me go back, reduce the cost for prototypes. That's really the main thing when we talk about simulations. And then we can also improve time to market by reducing prototyping costs. That's going to improve time to market, and also improve documentation for the product benefit. And it can also be used for biomechanics research. So and so that's muscular skeletal simulation. Now I'm jumping into the other topic, which is the finite element analysis. So as you know, with a finite element analysis, you start out with a CAD geometry. And in this specific case, we start out with the bone geometry. And this bone geometry for each patient, in the case of patient-specific data, it can be scanned and it can be brought into these muscular skeletal models. And as you know, when you do a finite element analysis, you take that data, the solid model, and mesh it. And then you do mesh convergence studies to make sure that you're getting the right stresses and the right fatigue calculations out of your model. And as you know, in a finite element analysis, we are solving this matrix. Stiffness matrix multiplied by displacement is equal to the forces. So if we are doing a linear elastic analysis, we solve this equation once, and we get the displacements. From the displacements, we calculate the stresses. But if we are doing a nonlinear analysis, which in some of these cases, we do these nonlinear simulations, then we solve this equation over and over until we get convergence. And if we are doing a dynamic analysis, the dynamic analysis can be a linear dynamic or nonlinear dynamic analysis. So in either case, in a dynamic analysis, these set of equations are being solved over a time domain. And for each time increment, if it's a nonlinear dynamic analysis, for each time increment, you're going to do multiple iterations to get convergence. So, and the difference between a nonlinear static analysis and the dynamic analyses, as you know, are these additional matrices that come in, like the M matrix, which is the mass matrix multiplied by acceleration, and the C matrix, that's the damping matrix multiplied the velocities, that they are added to the stiffness matrix times the displacements. Then we are specifying forces as a function of time. And these forces on the right-hand side of this equation are coming from the musculoskeletal simulation. So, and that's kind of the procedure. You start out with this musculoskeletal model. Then from there, you create a finite element model. And then you start, if it's a nonlinear simulation, then you will have to start iterating between them. So when we do these finite element models, of course, the finite element analysis is going to assume that the bone geometry we are looking at is elastic. Now, going back to musculoskeletal models, the musculoskeletal models assume that the bones are rigid. So that's why at one point in time, if there's too much elasticity going on, then we will have to iterate back and forth between the musculoskeletal model and the finite element analysis to get to the right results. So in the finite element analysis part, the input that we get from the musculoskeletal models are the muscle insertion points, meaning that where are the muscles attached to the bones, and that's where we need to input the muscular forces. So that's going to be accounted for in the finite element model. So again, in the musculoskeletal model, the bones are assumed to be rigid. It doesn't address any tissue deformation, any bone deflection, and we address that issue by doing the finite element analysis and look at the elasticity of the bones and account for that, as you will see in the next slides. The ideal information flow is such that you start out with a patient-specific geometry, or in these musculoskeletal models, there are generic models. There are generic bones. But if you would like to address a patient-specific implant, then of course you'll have to scan that patient's bone geometry and bring it into the musculoskeletal model. Then from there, we go to the finite element model where we actually mesh the bone geometries. We can mesh the full skeleton, or we can mesh parts of it. So, and then we specify the boundary conditions on the bones, and then we run the musculoskeletal model, bring in the loads from there. And these loads, again, are dynamic loads. So because especially if we are doing a dynamic case like biking and or swimming, then as you know, the forces are changing as a function of time. So we'll have to bring them in as a function of time and apply them on the finite element model, solve it in transient dynamic mode, and then get the stresses, strains in the bones, as well as the stresses and strains in the implants, if there are any implants that we are looking at. So we can expand the use of activities of daily living with a library of musculoskeletal simulations. For example, We can look into anyone carrying heavy loads and or exercising and or sitting in the chair, and bike conditions, rowing conditions. We can really build a library of activities of daily living for patient-specific data. So for that, that will have to run the different activities of daily living and create that library. And so we are really bridging the gap with simulation. With simulation, we can actually we will still have to do some testing to verify that the finite element model is giving the right results, but it's going to, with simulation, the whole procedure will be accelerated. So as you see here, in this animation here, we have taken out the muscles, but you can actually see in a dynamic fashion what are the stresses in the bones themselves. And the bone geometry, you can actually change the stiffness of the bone. The bones are really stiff on the outside, but as we go inside the bone, the stiffness is going to change, and that type of stiffness change in the bone can also be taken care of by changing the Young's moduli of every single element in the finite element model. So, but most importantly, this type of extracting stresses, displacements from the finite element model for activities of daily living can be achieved by coupling these two simulations, musculoskeletal simulation with finite element simulation. And if you would like to add implants to this, then that also can be taken care of. We start with a geometry. Let's assume that this is our implant geometry. So with the geometry, we can look at different screw locations. Is it a fixed plate, or is it conforming or non-conforming cases? We can address all these conditions by creating a solid model of the implant itself. And then to that solid model, we add activities of daily living. And in addition to activities of daily living, if there are any lab conditions that we need to look into, we can add that as well. So we can bring in the geometry into musculoskeletal simulation, feed activities of daily living, any lab conditions, we feed them into here, and we can address the testing of the implant by using these musculoskeletal models. And then to evaluate the implant, then we can add the finite element simulation data, the finite element simulation part, I should say, and where the musculoskeletal simulation is going to bring in the different forces, muscular forces, as well as the joint forces into the finite element model for any activities of daily living, for any lab conditions, for any geometry of the implant that we are considering, so that we can address the strength of the implant as well as any questions with respect to the fatigue and life cycle of the implant itself. And on top of all this, we can actually optimize. In the previous slide, we start out with a design, right? We can actually optimize that design by putting the whole procedure through the optimizer. And we can do not only single objective optimization, but also multi-objective optimization. So we did that in one case, and a couple of our engineers, they presented a paper at the ASME Biomed conference, and the title is Activities of Daily Living and Implant Design, Evaluation of a fixed plate implant during bicycle pedaling. And we work with, I believe, Specialized Bike Company, where we actually looked at the cycling data. This is one of the employees at Specialized Bike, where we were able to extract all the muscular information. And from the movie, we were able to get the muscular and also, I'm sorry, the skeletal as well as the load conditions, and did the muscular skeletal simulation, basically replicate the test conditions there. And once you do that, then you start getting the muscular forces in X, Y, Z directions as a function of time, and which is the output that's coming from the muscular skeletal simulation. And then you take those and apply them into the finite element model as a boundary condition. And as you see here in the finite element model, you have all these green dots which represent the muscle locations where they are tied to the bones, where they are attached to the bones. And then at those locations, we're applying forces as a function of time and as a function of X, Y, Z spatial location. And then we look at three different plate thicknesses. And for these three different plate thicknesses, we were able to extract the fatigue cycles, the fatigue life. So of course the 3.25 millimeter thick plate gave us the least amount of cycles, whereas the 4.75 millimeter, the thicker plate, gave us 14.7 million cycles. This is cycles to fatigue, and that's the fatigue life of the implant. And you can, when you do the finite element analysis, you can also extract the stress contour plots and any displacements like we see here. So please note that this is exaggerated. This is exaggerated 18 times. This is what happens when the bicyclist is going through the cycle. And so again, this is exaggerated, but we are actually getting the displacements. And this next plot is the stress plot, where it's true scale. It's not exaggerated displacements, but you can see there's still slight movement of the bone from this simulation as well, from the animation. So, so FDA actually requires a 4-point bending test on these. And if you take that implant, you will have to do this test, a 4-point bending test, to evaluate the fatigue life. But through our procedure here, you're actually looking at the actual deformation, the actual stresses for activities of daily living. So you're not really replicating a lab condition, but you're also replicating the activities of daily living condition. So, in the old times, the implant design used to pass, you had to pass this type of a test, but through this procedure, you can actually get more realistic feedback about your design. So there is one of our partners, CATVAM, and the company they founded, SIMQ. They do have a commercial software out there that's being used to evaluate jaws and upper portion of the skeleton. And they actually have these type of activities already loaded in the software, so that what this does is that you don't have to run the muscular skeletal simulation, because these cases are already ran and they're already put into the software. So all you have to do is really just specify either the new bone geometry and or the implant, and then you can have it tested for these different activities of daily living. So this procedure is already established and input into their software called SIMQ. But in summary, what we are proposing here is it replicates physical tests using simulation. So we are really, you know, emphasizing the use of simulation. And using this procedure here, you can compare performance of new implant design to the current ones in the marketplace. And you can replicate implant failure conditions associated with clinical and or case-specific performance criteria. And you can evaluate implant performance criteria. Like you can look at total deformation, maximum stress, maximum strain, and or fatigue life, and or any fracture parameters you may be interested in. So you can get all of this from the finite element analysis. And in addition to that, you can evaluate implant performance for different population groups. As you see in the upper right-hand corner, shorter people or taller people. And also, you can also look into, different patient-specific bones, different bone strengths. And then you can perform shape optimization of if you can specify your implant parametrically, which these days it's very doable. You can do the optimization based on different parameters. And again, multi-objective, you can specify multi-objective criteria using the procedures that we outline here. You can also perform sensitivity analysis through this procedure as to where you should place screws, and or implant variations. And you can also look into bone stresses, since we're actually modeling the bones themselves. You can look at the bone stresses and interfaces for different activities of daily living. So how is this going to help the design and the company? It's going to basically, with the procedure that's defined here, outlined here at the bottom of the page, you can actually increase the number of possible design iterations. You can look into a lot more different cases within a fixed amount of time. And you can decrease the cost of each design iteration, meaning the cost of prototypes. You can improve fidelity of analysis as related to making design change decisions. You can evaluate products and devices for different population groups, like we discussed in the previous slide. And you can optimize design based on physiologically representative forces, evaluate implant performance for everyday and activities of living for everyday and or exercise conditions. And you can create your own exercise conditions and or activities of daily living. And you can compare your own design with respect to what's available in the market. So basically, in summary, the procedure outlined here creates the most realistic simulations for medical device implant performance. The procedure can be used for personalized implants where performance of the device can be optimized for skeletal location, personal daily living activities, and maximum fatigue life of the device. All right. Sorry about that. So, like I said, Ozen Engineering, we are an engineering company, also an Ansys distributor. We sell a lot of different engineering software tools in different physics. And our headquarters is in Sunnyvale, California. We have a Mid-Atlantic office in Durham, and also a DC area office in Maryland. So if you'd like to contact us, you can send us, call us, or send us an email. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and open it up for any questions that you may have.